Bakla!
Hi everyone, welcome to Buckle Up Podcast. I'm Natalia Earl and I'm a certified business and life coach that loves talking to people. I'm fascinated by humans and how our brain works. What is it that makes a decision good or bad, and how does that decision ultimately shape our path and destiny? Everyone loves to talk about success, but what about the flip side? How about adversity, failure? It's such a big and often necessary part of life, and it's simply unavoidable. So I invite you to join me on this inspiring, honest, unpolished interview show with breathtakingly real conversations that go deep on setbacks and hardships that are part of the puzzle that ultimately lead to growth, discovery of inner greatness, and what makes us resilient.
Bakla!
Grab your helmet and buckle up, people. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but what a ride it will be. Today's guest, Tatiana Moroz, is an American folk singer-songwriter and a driving force in the cryptocurrency industry. Tatiana unites modern technology and economics with the classic social awareness and influence of songwriters of the 60s and 70s. Her inspiring album, Keep the Faith, was released in 2017 and funded via cryptocurrency. A graduate of Berklee College of Music, Tatiana has been a vocal advocate in the Bitcoin community since 2012. Tatiana performs and speaks at crypto and liberty conferences all over the world. She's also the founder of the Crypto Media Hub, a PR, marketing, and advertising agency for the blockchain space. She hosts two podcasts, The Tatiana Show and Proof of Love, which stream on several outlets, including the Let's Talk Bitcoin network.
I feel like I've always really been driven toward music. And also I was really impacted by the 60s and 70s singer-songwriters and a lot of dystopian novels, and also tales of horror from, World War II and onward, and communism especially. So I developed that interest in how the world is organized at the same time as my mom was indoctrinating me with singer-songwriters from the 60s and 70s. And I had listened to Cat Stevens with Peace Train, and that really stuck with me, the way that you could use music to convey a message and have a really big impact. And I felt my own generation, really lacked some kind of meaning. In 2011, I found out about the Federal Reserve, and I also saw a couple of films. I'm going to start playing them. Me and my room and played one of them tonight, called America, Freedom to Fascism, and also Fiat Empire and the Money Masters, and became a big fan of Ron Paul, because Ron Paul is, of course, against, the Fed. That's what he's known for, and the Fed. So very soon after participating in the political process and, being lucky, I sang all around the country. It's a big dream to be, a peace singer. But I became very disillusioned with the political process, of course, seeing the corruption in the Republican Party toward their own candidate. I mean, then later on you see in the Democrats, but to me, they're all the same. And I didn't think that it was an effective method of activism, even though my music still reflects the message of freedom. Luckily, I was introduced to Bitcoin in August of 2013 when it was $11. And while I didn't have a lot of money, I did put a little bit of money in, and of course it piqued my interest from there.
You were one of the first musical artists that created their own coins called Tatiana Coin. So tell us a little bit about that. Why did you create it? Why is it important? And what are some of the benefits for the listeners to own the coin?
So basically, you mentioned that I'm lucky to be an artist and to be having my message heard. And I think that that's really a very different situation than the times that inspired me. Obviously, we're seeing that there's a lot more government propaganda, and there's you know, tons of evidence that that also is in play in the music industry. And, you know, I went to Berklee College of Music. I consider myself to have a good work ethic. I did a lot of the right things, but nonetheless, to have your music heard is extremely difficult. I was an early adopter of social media and was really enthusiastic about using social media to connect with my fans and to build out my fan base. But when it became like every fan was kind of tied to each platform's success. So when MySpace goes out of style, now you have to rebuild your whole entire audience over at YouTube. And then from YouTube, you have to go over to Facebook. And then all of a sudden they start charging you to reach your fans. And then if you know, I mean, people now talk about censorship. There was a ton of censorship in the Ron Paul days. So I was really keenly aware of that. And as a musician with a peace message, I mean, I have songs specifically, you know, calling to end the Fed, you know, that's not really very popular with the state. And unfortunately, the United States has become, you know, like the propaganda king of the world. So among those challenges, there's also, you know, financial challenges for artists, not only getting heard, but, you know, how do you make sure that you don't have 6 other jobs while you're trying to pursue your music? And I mean, that's something that I'm still struggling with. I'm putting out a new album. Like, it's still really hard. And, you know, you have like a purpose in life in a lot of ways, like those really difficult moments. And I think for me, that suffering and torture of dealing with the music industry and not having enough money to put out my stuff and struggling to stay in contact with my fans through the different evolutions of technology really brought me to the idea of Tatiana Coin. So it combined a lot of ideas that people were already familiar with. So, you know, like a Patreon model or an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter. And when people bought Tatiana Coin, we minted 3 million of that. And then October 21st, we're putting out the album, the full album. So we're kind of leading up, we're teasing people. We've shared some of the artwork already. And I'm happy to talk about the art because I think it's really neat. But the inspiration for the album is love, right? I spent a lot of time, you know, being like, where's my true love? And I actually really don't date a lot. Like, I've gotten to the point where I'm just like, I literally am not even trying to date. I mean, like, in my mind, I'm trying to date, but I'm not even acting on that. And you
Same.
know, I started writing these songs and being like, wow, there's a lot of like depressing love songs here. And what was frustrating was like I kept writing these songs to these people. I was like, don't you understand we're meant to be together? Like, it was so frustrating. I'm like, but I'm writing you this beautiful song. Like, I put all this effort. This is like a masterpiece. Like, this is like, have you not seen any romantic comedies? You're supposed to go for me now. And so it was just such a frustrating experience. And so I was like, these are love songs for idiots because these people can't figure it out.
I
But
love it.
but the reality is, it's like, as I started like looking at that from a little bit of a different perspective, I was like, wow, well, there are also, you know, avoidant parts of myself and parts where I'm not necessarily participating. And I may blame it on the other person, or, you know, like there's different ways that you can kind of trick yourself. And if you read anything about attachment theory, have you ever read any attachment theory stuff? I'm sure your audience has, but basically the premise is there's like a few categories of people. They took some babies. They're like, oh, are they really mad when their mom leaves? And the secure ones are like, yeah, mom leaves, come back, no problem. And I always thought that I was the anxious one, which is, you know, really gets very like, if I like somebody, I'm like, oh man, I'm in love, right? And it's problematic because you feel like you're an insane person. But you know, there's different reasons why that happens. And when you get a little bit of compassion for yourself, I think that's something that I've been like trying to work through. But as I'm going through the record, I'm like, wow, I'm a little bit avoidant too, which is like the worst one in my opinion. Like,
Right.
anxious avoidant combo is like terrible. And that's where I'm ending up. So I've always used my music as a way of, you know, working through personal problems, and that's like what every artist does, right? But with this, I tried to make it a little bit kind of funny and observing this love stuff. And a lot of my records have focused on, you know, freedom and like these causes. And, you know, I have a Silk Road song and I have like a peace song. I have these kinds of things. But if you hang out in any kind of political movement for a while, you realize that people are insane. They're pretty terrible. And they're really kind of like don't even live by their principles. I think that my love stories are relatable. I think that people go through this, and they're not just love stories. I mean, I have song, You can't fight crazy. Who hasn't had I had this crazy lady, she was like causing all these problems. And I just wrote this song. It was kind of very funny. It's like, I'm gonna kick your ass song. That's literally what it is. Like, I took a line from Cobra Kai, like, I'm coming for you with the crew, like the whole thing is totally preposterous. But who hasn't felt like that? What are you gonna do if you're dealing with a maniac? Or are you gonna fight with them? Are you gonna get in the mud with the pigs? No. And
Nope.
it's so frustrating. So
Right.
I don't know, like, you have to have a little bit of a sense of humor about how annoying life can be. And so I try and bring some authenticity, some sincerity, and some jokes to Love Songs for Idiots. And that's why we chose such a funny title. I was going to make it Gemini, the two sides of me or something. And then my friend was like, no, do Love Songs for Idiots. And people crack up because they've all, like, if you don't crack up at that, like, you definitely need to go to therapy. Like, because that means, like, because that's everybody's found themselves in that position at one point, and probably most relationships, everybody's a little bit of an idiot, as is. So,
For
I mean, love is
sure.
stupid.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Created this platform called Pixel Mind, and Pixel Mind is AI art. So if your audience is listening, they can go to tatianamoroz.com and they'll see some art there that, like, there's basically pictures of me, but they look like they're kind of half art, half photo. And that's because they are. But the art was generated, we took a photo and we took these kind of tongue-in-cheek photos that are kind of like bachelorette-ish. And we put them in through the AI, and then the AI generated a ton of different images. And this was like the most basic AI that we were using, and they still had emotion. And they still had, a lot that I just thought was really unique about them. And I was really excited to be trying out this technology. And also like play around with the idea, is art if it's not made by a person? Like, how artsy is it? Are we just giving the keys to the kingdom over to the Terminator 2 overlords? Like, I don't really like, I'm not trying to like put all the artists out of business. So we've since then come up with a number of different uses, and where we ended up landing, which is we'll issue some NFTs around the album with this, is we would take these initial images, we run them through the AI, and then Nikki, she'll come in and she'll redo the artwork like in certain spots and kind of blend the images. So now you still have the photographer employed, you still have Nikki employed, but she's able to save time. And even before we started doing this show today, I was talking about, I need to do a music video. And if you have any musicians in the audience, when you have to do a music video, it's like, oh, great, I get to spend like $10,000. Like, whoa, just what I want to do. And that's completely not even possible most of the time, right? And you can make videos on your phone, but with Pixel Mind now, what we're playing around with is using the AI to generate videos. So if I can time it correctly, by October, I'd love to put out a video where we're doing a multimedia experience where they're getting regular video, maybe being like, oh, I'm singing this song. And then you've got, some kind of cool background that's an AI generated image. And furthermore, even with doing static images, you can, like, I can tell the AI to do something, but so can you. Wow. So here before, you were just like my family, like, it sounds so fun. But like, if let's say you have a lot of Tatiana coin and I'm like, oh, you're my super fan, let's do this together. Or I run a contest, I could say, hey, let's all try and create an art piece together. And I mean, and you can do that at a really low cost. Like, obviously right now it's early on.
So in today's day, what is the biggest adversity that the artists are facing, in your opinion?
Well, I'm a political artist, right? So for me, I want to say wokeness, right? Because if you have a political view that's outside of whatever is because there's certain protest music that is permitted and then certain protest music that isn't. But I wouldn't say that that's a major thing that most artists are concerned with. And sometimes when I listen to music, I'm just like, thank God there's not a political message in here. I wish I stopped thinking about politics. I would say like sluttiness is a really big problem. I think it's been a problem. Like when Britney Spears came out, I felt like that was the death of music. I was thinking, like, I was listening, we're making like a Spotify playlist because that's what you do when you put out an album. And so I'm on Spotify, subscribe there. So So we were making like a Spotify playlist, and I started thinking about all these singer-songwriters, and the ones that really inspired me beyond the 60s and 70s were like the 90s ones, right? In the 90s, you had amazing female singer-songwriters. You had Indigo Girls, you had Fiona Apple, you had Jewel, you had yourself some like Alanis Morissette, you had Tori Amos, and all of them were amazing, and none of them were hoey. Like, they were sexy, they were pretty, some of them not, but that's not why you loved them. You loved the whole of them. You loved them for what they went through. And now you have even the most like wholesome of them all, Taylor, wholesome. I mean, like, her songs have some meaning and stuff like that, but there's a real lack of depth for popular female artists. And the messages are usually like, you don't need no man. It's like, I do. What are you talking about? You can't freaking open up a jar. I can't, like, I just bought an apartment. I don't know how to fix anything. It's like horrible. You need a man unless you've got a big fat paycheck and to keep paying the handyman $500 every time. Shut up, ladies. Don't be so freaking harsh. You know, and like, I don't think that, like, we should have such a uniform perspective of what it means to be for women or for men. Like, what is masculinity, and why does somebody else get to define what that is? Like, music is a gray area, and it's also like a place of multiple shades, right? Of not just gray, but multiple colors. And the whole thing is just how can you not like